Hey y'all, if you've ever felt like you're doing all the right things, you're exercising, you're drinking water, maybe you've even been to physical therapy and you're still leaking, then today's video is for you. What doesn't get talked about enough, and one of the biggest reasons you may not be seeing progress, is chronic stress. In today's video, I'm going to share with you why that matters, especially if you're in midlife, and why stress relief may be the missing piece to your journey to stop those leaks. So let's get into it. All right, so let's talk about what chronic stress looks like. So it's not just about being busy. Most women I know lead very busy lives, but we're talking about that persistent feeling of overwhelm, like persistently feeling like you're drowning and underwater. And so chronic stress is pretty common in midlife, specifically for women who are dealing with the symptoms of perimenopause. Maybe you're dealing with aging parents and raising children. Maybe there's been changes in your work life and your home life. And so this is pretty typical around this time in life. And that persistent feeling of overwhelm is something that creates stress and tension in your body. And even if you don't feel it, your body is holding on to it. And a lot of times that tension is housed in the pelvis. And what else is in your pelvis? Your pelvic floor. So if you're in a constant state of overwhelm, you're in this just persistent fight or flight sensation in your body, your pelvic floor is also in that same kind of state of being. And so your pelvic floor can hold a lot of tension just like your body can. And that contributes to leakage, believe it or not. That is definitely not something that's in your favor if you're dealing with leakage. And that's why all the exercises in the world, you can do them, but they won't be effective if you're not dealing with chronic stress. And so we just want to have a counter. We want to have some way to offset that, a form of release. I've kind of coined the phrase for myself of like searching for peace, actively looking for ways to find peace in your body. And so that looks very different for every woman, every person, but you have to start to lock into the things that bring you comfort, that give you a physical release as well as a mental release, so that you're not in this constant state of fight or flight, because our pelvic floor does respond to it, and anything that we do to offset leakage won't work. And this is another like key point, and you probably heard me say in many of my videos, why Kegels don't work for everyone. I won't say anyone. Why Kegels don't work for everyone, because Kegels only focus on the tightening phase of the pelvic floor. And if you're already have a lot of tension there, subconsciously or consciously, tightening more isn't going to help. You can't squeeze your way out of stress. And so chronic stress is a really, really big influence on leakage. And if that's something that you're dealing with, we have to address that first before we get into any type of exercise to stop your leakage. And I'll just add a little bit to that seeking peace or finding ways to have releases in your body. Again, I already mentioned that looks different for everyone, but that could be walks in the afternoon. That could be 5 minutes of prayer in the morning. That could be really nourishing your body with foods that reduce inflammation. It could be reading, setting just one-on-one time for yourself every single day. Whatever that peace looks like for you, whatever that release looks like for you, journaling, we have to actively seek those things to counter the things that we can't control, which would be our parents aging, things that are going on around us, prices going up, financial constraints. Those are the things that we can't control. So we want to work on how can we maintain peace in our lives so that we're countering the stress that all of us have to deal with day to day. So what does chronic stress do to your body? It puts your nervous system on high alert. So we've all heard of fight or flight. I mentioned that a little bit ago. But if your body is in this constant state of fight or flight, it is perceiving danger at all times. That means that your breathing gets shallow, your muscles stiffen, your pelvic floor tightens. Those muscles activate in response to fear or stress. And so that means that your body's in this constant state of holding. So again, tightening more and doing Kegels is not going to help that situation. A lot of times people aren't aware that leakage is not always the result of weakness, which is why Kegels is not always the best prescription. Some people have very strong pelvic floors and they leak. And some people, what's not talked about enough is an overactive pelvic floor. And that's where tightening more, squeezing can actually make those problems worse. And so We don't want to increase tension in an area that's in a constant holding state. We have to have a release. I always give the example of your bicep. If your bicep is shortened like this all the time, when you need to go pick something up, you're not going to be able to do that. You have to be able to extend your arm so that you can lift, grab and pull something closer to your body. The pelvic floor is the same way. If it's always in a shortened state, it's not going to really be able to respond when you need it to engage with coughing, laughing, sneezing, jumping, running, all of those activities that we do that a lot of women have leakage during those times. And so we want those muscles to perform efficiently. When they're in that constant holding phase, they also can fatigue pretty easily. So now you can start to see why being on high alert, one, it's not good. And then two, squeezing more could potentially make that problem worse. So exercise is great. I'm always going to encourage movement, but exercise alone will not stop leakage if stress is not addressed. So this is why a lot of women that I work with, they come to me, they've tried Kegels, they've tried several different pelvic floor exercises, but if the root cause of their leakage is actually tension and chronic stress that they're not dealing with outside of the gym, then that is why we just haven't been able to, or they haven't been able to move the needle in stopping their leakage. And so again, Kegels are not bad. A lot of women start there, or that is the recommendation for them. It's not always appropriate, but that exercise in isolation isn't bad. But if stress is unaddressed, it won't be helpful. And so we want to get to the root cause of the leakage. And if we don't have a release for your pelvic floor, then we're not going to be able to get those muscles to activate efficiently. So we want to make sure that we're addressing the root cause of the problem of your leakage. And if chronic stress is an issue, or if you're holding tension in your pelvic floor, we want to have that release first, and then we can start to build on that foundation so that your muscles can work in harmony with the other muscles in your body. I always like to say, let's turn down the volume of the pelvic floor so that the rest of your core can work together. So that includes abdominal muscles, back muscles, hip muscles, how you breathe. There can be a lot of dysfunction when your pelvic floor is doing all the work and holding all the tension. So we want to give that area of your body a break and make sure that we're addressing all the other areas that need to maybe put in a little bit more effort so that your pelvic floor and your core can work in harmony so that you don't have the leakage. So what do we do instead? We give the body what it's asking for, what it's actually craving, which is safety, relief, and connection. And so I want to talk about those in each as separate points. So number one, safety. How do we achieve that? Like I mentioned before, when your body is in fight or flight, it's sensing danger. It doesn't really feel that it's okay to let go. So first, we want to establish that safety in our body. So that means breath work, grounding, again, through meditation, prayer, whatever physically works for the person. Finding that safety, that safe place for you, that one-on-one time, that also leads into connection, which I'll talk about next. But we want our body to start having positive experiences. So I talk a lot about leakage, but there are many other pelvic floor problems that correlate with leakage. Pelvic pain is one of them, pain with sex, even constipation. Those things are associated with high tone or high tension in your pelvic floor muscles. And so leakage may be like the thing that's grabbing your attention, but there's usually other things that correlate with that. And so if every time we go to the bathroom, we have pain, every time we're trying to poop, we got to push it out and bear down and hold our breath, and our body starts to feel like, okay, this is a painful experience. If every time we have sex, we're guarding and just kind of like grinning and bearing it so that we can get through it, again, that becomes a negative experience. Even when we love our partners and we're having everything else is working well outside of the relationship, once you've had a negative or painful experience, your body does remember that. And so we want to start to build positive experiences. And a lot of times that happens outside of the bedroom, outside of the toilet, and that's where that safety starts to take place. So that I always say, when we look at athletes, I ran track in high school, so I'm always using a track reference. But when I look at the professionals in the Olympics, they train 4 years plus for that. Some of them way more longer than that, but they train years for that one event. And so they don't show up on the track the day of the Olympics and thinking they're going to win a gold medal. They prep for that. And so we have to do the same thing for your pelvic floor. We prep for the event, whether it's having sex or having a bowel movement. How can we create safety within your body? How can we create intimacy with your partner outside of the bedroom? How can we create release, for your pelvic floor outside of sitting on the toilet? And so those are the positive experiences that we start to build upon, so that when you do try to use the bathroom or have more intimate moments with your partner, your pelvic floor is not guarded and sensing fear. So the second way that we give our body what it needs and what it's craving is establishing connection. And so this can be kind of tricky for people, especially when you have established a disconnection with your body through leakage. So sometimes that disconnection starts to happen when we avoid activities, like we stop running, we stop jumping, we stop squatting, we cross our legs when we sneeze because we're so fearful of leaking. And then it's almost like we shut off that part of our body when we avoid movement and avoid activities. So we have to reestablish that connection and that, again, that safe space within our own bodies. I kind of joke around and say it's like redating yourself. You know what I mean? How can you use breath work to establish the connection between your diaphragm and your pelvic floor? How can you start to use some of these grounding exercises to start speaking positively to yourself? I will make it to the bathroom. I have control of my body. Like, those things sound kind of silly, but that's how we reestablish that connection with ourselves and begin to trust our bodies again. And so that is something that's not talked about as much, but that's something that's highly effective and very important to stop leaking that's outside of exercise. So the last way that we give our body what it needs and what it's craving is giving it relief. Relieve the pressure of doing it all. And if you're a mom or just a woman, like, raise your hand if you want that. And so I know I do. And so it may sound harsh, but we have to realize, like, no one is coming to save us. We have to be the ones to give ourselves that relief, give ourselves and our bodies that gift of relief. So that means speaking up to our partners for what we need, establishing firm boundaries in relationships, whether they're personal or at work, whatever you need, like I said earlier, to maintain your peace, speaking up for what you need, taking that one-on-one time for yourself. And I do mean taking it. No one is going to give that to you. So you have to start to peel off the layers and take off that Superwoman cape, because no one is giving us a gold medal for that. It is wearing you down. It is making your leakage worse, and you deserve better. So giving yourself relief is something that you have to do for yourself, so that we can start to clear out all that tension, get out of fight or flight, and reestablish what our pelvic floor is supposed to do. Once you can do that, your pelvic floor can heal, your exercises are going to be more effective, and you're going to establish a routine that is just overall wellness for your body. All right. As always, I hope all of this resonates with you and you're beginning to see why chronic stress is something that cannot go unaddressed if we really want to resolve the leakage. So don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss any future videos. And if you'd like to dig a little bit deeper or want to see if we're a good fit to work one-on-one together, don't forget to click the link in my description to apply. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.